Alright, today we're going to do a slope review. The first we're going to look at is identifying slope in the slope-intercept form. This is your slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Most of us can remember this form, but I think we forget what everything stands for every once in a while. X and the y in here, so here and here, these are the points that are on the graph. Okay, remember this graph's a straight line, a linear equation. Your m always stands for your slope, and your b always stands for your y-intercept, where it crosses the y-axis. Alright, remember also with slope, it's always going to be your coefficient of x. Always your coefficient of x. Don't forget that, because sometimes they do some weird things to you. Okay, so let's look at this. Here's my x, here's my coefficient. So m equals 3 over 4. Here's my x, here's my coefficient. Always grab the sign that's right in front of it. So my m equals -8. Alright, this one, they flip-flopped everything, but just find your x, take the sign in front of their coefficient, so your m is equal to -7 over 9. Alright, so the main thing, as long as it is y equals mx plus b form, slope-intercept form, find your x coefficient. Alright, now we're going to look at standard form. And I'm going to show you standard form in two different ways. Alright, the first way I'm going to show it to you is, let's rewrite this in slope-intercept form. So we're going to rearrange it. The second way, I'm going to show you how to find slope straight from standard form. The problem with doing it that way is you don't remember it a lot of times, so that's why I want to show you both the ways. So let's look at 10x minus 3y equals -15. To rearrange this, what we're trying to do is isolate our y and say y equals. Alright, so we don't want to move this term, which means this 10x needs to move to the other side. If it's a positive here, then when it moves to the other side, it has to become a negative. So -10x. Okay, we're subtracting 10x on both sides. So now what I have is -3y equals -15 minus 10x. Okay, all I did is pick this 10x up and move it to the other side of the equation. Alright, now, we still have to get this y completely by itself. So remember, when we have a coefficient in front of a variable, the inverse operation is divide by -3. I like, in my classes, to divide each term by -3 and not just do one long line here, -3, because we forget to divide each term. So, you can do it this way, and then -3's cancel out. It becomes 1, which we don't write a 1 with division problems. So we're left with y. Negative and a negative forms a positive. So 15 divided by 3 is 5. A negative and a negative again become positive. We cannot reduce 10 over 3, so that stays as is. So once you write it this way, great, but you haven't answered the question. Make sure you answer the question. We still want to find the slope. So here's my x, which means, this is my slope. So m equals 10 over 3. And I'm going to work all of the rearranging side first, and then I'll come over and show you the other column. And I'm telling you, this one's the easiest if you can remember. Alright, so again, we're trying to isolate this y, and if you notice, I always box the sign that's in front of that y term, and then I want to take this x and move it to the other side. It's a positive here, so now it's a negative. So that's no longer on this side. It's a positive y, so I just have to write y equals -3 minus x. Well, now our y is already completely by itself, So we don't have anything else to do. What you have to remember, here's our x. There's a 1 in front of our x. So our slope is -1. Okay, last one here. Okay, I'm going to box this with my term in front. And the reason I'm boxing it is so I know that's staying put. I'm trying to get my y by itself, so I don't want to touch it. That's the last thing I touch. So I'm going to take 7x, move it to the other side. It's a positive here. Now it's going to become a negative. So -7x. So it's no longer here. So I have a positive 2y equals -10 minus 7x. Again, I'm still trying to get my y completely by itself. So to get the coefficient away from my y, I divide everything by 2. Okay. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Oops, why isn't it writing? Oops. 2 divided by 2 is 1, which we don't write the 1, so y equals a negative and a positive, so it'll give me a negative. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Negative and a positive, keep the negative. 7 divided by 2, I cannot reduce, so I keep it as 7/2 x. Again, find your x. Here's my x. My coefficient in front is going to be my slope. So here m equals -7/2. A couple things to remember. Keep it as a fraction. Don't type it in your calculator and get a decimal, because remember, when you do slope, you want rise over run. You want rise over run, so you want to try to keep it as a fraction. Another thing that I see a lot of is this, where I have my negative here, is the same thing as putting your negative here. Remember, a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So same thing on this one. A positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative. Or you can just keep your negative in the very front of the fraction. So the negative placement doesn't matter. Just make sure you only have one negative. Okay, so that's rearranging the problem. Now, in standard form, you can actually find the slope just looking at it. It's the opposite of A over B. So standard form, this is A, remember it's up here. This is A, this is B, this is C. And remember, this means opposite. All right, so opposite of A is -10. Don't do the opposite of B. So B is -3, but two negatives make a positive, so your slope is 10/3. So it is a lot easier, it's just that we forget that that's what that means. All right, so let's look. Put a 1 here, put a 1 here, just so you have your coefficients in there. This is A, B, C. Opposite of A, so my A is 1, so opposite of A, and then over B. My B is 1, so I get 1. Well, simplify -1 divided by 1 is -1. All right, and the last one, and I always like to label just so I don't get anything confused, and I always like to write this because sometimes I forget to take my opposite. So opposite of A is -7. Okay, my B, sometimes you like to circle this too so I see what sign my B is. B is +2, so just write a 2. And you can't simplify -7/2. So there's my final answer. So again, opposite of A over B is by far the easiest, but we just don't remember it. So if you can keep that in your brain and remember, wonderful. If not, you might just try to work them as rearranging the equation.